Hi, and welcome back to Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to you. And tonight it is going to be packed with a whole lot of romance coming down this particular show. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and let us see who all is bringing in a lot for the fall and Halloween season as we head into the holidays. So, Miss Dorine, you are up first.
Hi, I am Layla Dorine. I write LGBTQ fiction and romance, and tonight I am here to talk to you about my release for the day, which is my Road to Oktoberfest book, Broken Chorus.
Seressia?
My name is Seressia Glass. I write paranormal romance and urban fantasy, and I'm here to talk to you tonight about my next installation in my Shadow Chasers universe.
Ari?
Hi, I'm Ari McKay, and I am also part of the Road to Rocktoberfest, and I am here to talk about my new release, High Strung.
Irene?
Hi, I'm Irene Preston. I write romance of both the contemporary and paranormal variety. I'm here to talk about my new book, The God's Guardian, part of the Pharaoh's Promise series. And I think they're calling it romantasy these days. So excited to be here.
Liv?
Irene wrote a book set in BC, therefore she's a historical romance author as well. I just want to say that. I'm Liv. I write paranormal and historical, and my most recent release is paranormal and historical. The God's Guardian is Irene's book. My book is The Icon Thief.
Miss Rain?
Yeah, hi, I'm Layla Reyne. I write LGBTQ romance, romantic suspense, urban fantasy, paranormal, and I'm here to talk about Paris and the Reaper, which is my new book in the Soul Defined series.
And Allison?
Hi, I'm Allison Temple, but you can call me Allie. I'm here tonight to talk about my new release. It's a queer urban fantasy called Only Mostly Dead, and it kicks off the Afterlife Incorporated series.
So let's dive a little bit into this great collection of stuff that's going to be adding on to a lot of people's to-be-read piles. So, Miss Doreen, since we have two Laylas, and I will screw that up at some point in time tonight, just let's go ahead and get that out the way. Let's talk a little bit about the big setup for this one.
Well, this band played at Rocktoberfest last year. They weren't in the book that I wrote about, but they were there. They took one of the stages. And since then, they have lost their lead singer. He has had to retire from being on the road. And so the idea is kind of for them to go from a 5-man band to a 4, except the lead guitarist really doesn't want to take that singing part over, and he's really reluctant to do it. So they've kind of found themselves in a bit of turmoil because now they also lose a few other band members along the way to creative differences. And this road to Rocktoberfest to come back for them is not going to be smooth. It is very bumpy. It's angsty. But there are 3 adorable kids that kind of bring the humor to the story. And there's a teddy bear picnic. Who's not going to love seeing tatted up rocker boys dressed in like gothic steampunk, holding a teddy bear and feeding it little plastic, tea from the little plastic teacups, just so they can sit there and make the little girl happy. So it's a fun story to write.
And I still think that should have been the cover art. Just saying. Seressia, what are you bringing to us in this one?
Well, in this one, my heroine is named Morgan Lafayette, and she is an astral traveler, and she was trying to save a little girl. She got infected by Shadow, and it's basically trying to take over her system and steal her light. So her parents send her to a small village in England to be healed, and there she meets a literal knight in shining armor.
Ari, how about you? What's the big world in the setup we're looking at in this one?
This one was a little different for me. It's cello rockers. Totally inspired by 2 cellos. I have to admit, I love those guys. And this is a friends to enemies to acquaintances to friends to lovers. So it's a pretty complex relationship. 2 guys that grew up together as friends and musicians, and they start a band together, and then one of them sleeps with the boyfriend of the other it all works out. It's not a betrayal, but I don't want the romance fans to think that there's something really sketchy going on. It's all explained, but he gets a real big mad on for his friend, and that's my cover dude, Luca. And when one of the members of the F-Holes, that's their band, is injured, his former friend Kit is brought out of the other band to substitute for them, and Luca's not happy. So there's a very long arc there of what happens between the two of these guys.
Irene, how about you? Before what
Okay,
are we bringing? What are we bringing with God's Guardian?
I'm going to try to remember. I'm a historical romance writer now. This is my first foray. So this book is part of the Pharaoh's Promise, which is a multi-author world. So if you haven't heard of it yet, all of the books have a tie-in to artifacts from an ancient Egyptian tomb. So that's kind of maybe what got me there. I'm normally a contemporary writer, so I don't know quite how to frame things yet, and well, who knows how to frame things that are set in the ancient world. But so I'm kind of pitching it as a jock nerd romance, maybe. My main character grew up in the Himalayan mountains. And so he's a small town boy, but he's an astronomer. And in 219 BCE, the place to be if you were a scholar of any kind was Alexandria. So he heads off for the big city. And of course, once he gets there, like literally his first night, he falls into trouble. And he's rescued by a very athletic type of guy. And then it goes on from there. And there's a stolen artifact and, bad guys and drama and all the things you expect from fantasy and romance, and hopefully a happy ending.
All right, Liv, since you didn't write God's Guardian, what have you got this time?
No, I did not write God's Guardian, but I did write another book in the Pharaoh's Promise series, shared world, multi-author. Like Irene said, the premise is that an ancient Egyptian priest set a love spell to keep his beloved at his side forever, and he hid the spell in an ancient tomb where it basically infected all of the other items, and these artifacts have turned up in all kinds of different places. And in my book, it turned up, we're in 1855 Alexandria, and my book is called, I suppose I should tell you the title, The Icon Thief. And there's an evil priest, and there's historical medical practices, and there's a vampire. So it pretty much ticks all my boxes.
Miss Reyne.
Yeah, so we're back in the Soul Defined universe, and so it's an alt San Francisco, basically, where nature and chaos have been at war for a very long time, but in escalation for about 30 years. And in the middle of that is Mac, who is a Raven Shifter Reaper for his family. There's multiple, but for his clan. And then Paris, who at the start of the book, and we saw it a little bit in Icarus, his father has sacrificed him to the giants for power, basically. And, Mac and company kind of come to the rescue, but as a result of that sacrifice, Paris can now hear all the souls that have been channeled through him. So he's now a medium, and stuck with a Reaper. So it kind of makes sense.
Don't love the Reaper. So Allison, since this is bringing you into a new series, what kind of world are we falling into with this one?
Yeah, so Layla Reyne and I are celebrating Reaper Week together this week because Only Mostly Dead is also a Reaper fantasy. So in mine, Ember is a dead life coach who the book starts in Toronto, where I live, and she dies and has gone to great extremes to make her death as neat and organized as possible. but she doesn't understand that the afterlife is a giant bureaucratic mess. And so even though she's done her part, nobody comes to get her. And so she's sort of stuck ghosting around Toronto. And the only ally she finds is an unemployed Grim Reaper named Kelly, who would really rather stay home and eat pizza and play video games. But Ember's not taking no for an answer. So Kelly becomes an unwilling guide, I guess, trying to navigate. I saw someone online today described it as Beetlejuice meets The Office, and I think that's what I'm sticking with going forward. So that's the vibe. And yeah. So Dead Life Coach, Grim Reaper, Odd Couple. It's not a capital R romance. There will be a romance, but Reapers have a lot to learn about love. So it's going to take a few books to get there. But yeah, you get sort of an odd couple pairing until then.
Reaper romance. You can just share the R.
Yeah, exactly.
Love and death.
Love and death. You can't escape love and death.
So, Seressia, I want to hop over to you to start for this one.
Right.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into who we are hanging out with and falling in love with in this one.
Okay, like I mentioned before, Morgan Lafayette is a light witch, and she's also an astral traveler. And she was trying to help locate a missing girl, and she got attacked by shadow. So good and evil is basically light and shadow in my universe. And she got infected with this blight that is trying to consume the light that's in her, so consume all of her magic. So her family, she's a third generation family of witches, sends her to this small little village in England where there's a light healer named Meg and her son, whose name is Arthur, to try to heal her. And as she is there trying to get healed, she does some astral travel and meets Arthur on the astral plane as in his persona as a light guardian, basically a knight in shining armor. And together they try to heal her before the blight consumes her too much. And in his effort to help her, he calls on an old friend of his who just happens to be Kira Solomon, who's the main character of my Shadow Chaser urban fantasy series, and basically tries to get her to help. And if she can't help, then she's got to take Morgan out. So they're in a race against time to try to heal her before everything goes basically hell in a handbasket.
So, Ari, let's talk a little bit more about the dueling lovers in this one.
So, Luca, who is one of the main characters, is a cello prodigy, and his parents are immigrants from Eastern Europe, and he's always held up to be the heir to his grandfather's Stradivarius cello, which are very, very rare. But his grandfather had one. He was in the USSR Symphony Orchestra. So Luca is seen by his parents as being, he's supposed to be this great classical cellist. Yeah, he doesn't want to be that. He wants to be a rocker. So he's got some issues because of his parents have always tried to quash his ambition. And while he's in high school, he meets Kit Davies, who is a bass player, and they go to college together. They go to Juilliard, and while they're at Juilliard, they meet a couple of other people, and they form this band called Sultana. And Luca is also a great lyricist. He loves songwriting as well as playing, and so he's made all of the songs for Sultana. And right about the time that Sultana gets their first record contract, and they're about to actually embark on this great tour, Kit sleeps with Luca's boyfriend, but Kit didn't know that the guy was Luca's boyfriend. And so there is this great big falling out, and Luca, who is very, very high strung, there is a reason why I picked that title, storms off in a huff, leaves the band, and goes away and basically, drowns himself for about a year. And then when he comes back on the scene, he makes a new band, and he decides it's going to be a cello rock band. And he sets that up, and then just as that band is actually starting off on their very first tour, their bass player gets injured. And so Kit, who has been trying to apologize to Luca for 4 years and get his best friend back, goes to the record label and says, I want to be in the band. And so the record label lets him in the band. And then we have to follow them as this long progression as they go through making peace with each other. And so it's basically literally the road to Rocktoberfest, because they're on this nationwide tour that will eventually culminate at Rocktoberfest. So it's far more angsty than my normal fare. I tend to write a little lighter most of the time, but man, Luca he was a downer. He was a real major downer, but I think I finally got his head out of his butt. Yeah.
That's a tagline. He's a downer, but we finally get his head out of his butt.
Yep.
Irene, let's find out a little bit more about who we're hanging out with in the faraway past.
Okay. First of all, I want to say all your books sound great. Allison, though, I will say your book sounds way more like something I would have written than my book.
She's not wrong. She's not lying.
No, well, and it's very unlike me. So maybe Irene and I switched brains for a while this year. That's fine.
Actually, my hero, Bhaskar, I will say I've read Liv's The Icon Thief, and I love it. If you ever read Liv Rancourt, I consider this one of her best. But her hero and mine have a little something in common that I guess kind of does it for me in romance. And that is people in a historical setting being really cutting edge. Liv's doctor knows about bugs in the water, which is, the people he meets are like, no.
It was a legit scientific discovery in 1850. It was all right.
So my guy, my astronomer, he is a radical. He is promoting the radical theory that the Earth revolves around the sun, which was known in the time, but it was definitely not mainstream. It was a couple of people had proposed it, but it was not accepted at all. So there's that. Also, if any of you have read Hours of the Night, Bhaskar is a great, like 2,000 years worth of great uncle of Seressia Mishra. So if you know Sarah, you might know some things about Bhaskar. Things that just about his heritage. I don't know if I'm going to say too much about my characters because neither of them are very forthcoming for about the first half of the book with their full background to the other. I will say Boss is really excited to be in Alexandria. The Great Library was in full swing at the time. The Ptolemies were in power. Which I loved researching this book. So it was just a really bustling, cosmopolitan place. There were influences from Greece and Egypt kind of blending together. And then I bring in this Indian protagonist also. So there's all kinds of different cultural things going on. Anu is he has his own heritage, and that's him on the cover. So you might get some clues from that once you start reading the book. He does not appear that way exactly in the first about half of the book. But so he is also, he has a more of an Egyptian mindset. I think one of the few arguments, usually my characters, I think maybe spark a little bit more off of each other. Bhaskar is really anxious to get along with Anu, but one of the few times he stands up for himself is over it's over science, but it kind of verges into religious territory, and so he does not agree with when Anu does not accept his heliocentric theory. He thinks that once he thinks he's a good scientist, and once he researches it, he'll come around to the right way of thinking. That's it. Next.
All right, Liv, who are we hanging out with in this one? Let's dive a little bit deeper into you're not so as historical, but still historical.
Definitely
A
historical.
couple of hundred, not a couple of thousand.
I'm pretty much in awe of the amount of research Irene did, because I pretend to be a historical author, and she kind of blew me out of the water in that way. So mine is 1855, and my hero, one of my heroes, is a physician from London whose cousin, who is probably some kind of spy living in Alexandria, summons him and says, I need a favor. And it turns out his cousin is dying, and he needs Hugh, the hero, to retrieve an icon that has been stolen in order to avoid a multi-religious war in Alexandria. So that's kind of the setup. And the artifact that triggers the love spell, which is sort of one of the premises, or the premise of the series, is hidden in a case along with the icon that they're all after. And the other hero is a vampire, but he's newly turned and he doesn't quite know how to go about being a vampire. And so, and by the way, Hugh, the doctor, hates vampires, has had very bad life experience with vampires. So we have, and they're after this icon, which is in the possession of a priest who may or may not be possessed by a demon. And they're on a steamship for 2 weeks, headed from Alexandria to Southampton. And yeah, that's sort of the setup. We have to figure out if Hugh has been cast in the role of ship's doctor. So he's busy treating patients and dealing with the vampire and trying to get a hold of the icon. And yeah, shenanigans ensue, I guess.
Well, it's probably better to, have the life experiences than the undeath experiences.
True that.
Miss Rain.
Yeah, so we have Mac, who is the Raven Shifter. He's also a cold case detective. So that's kind of his day job, and he's very shut down, very locked down. He right when he became the Reaper, had to do something that basically broke his heart. And so he has pushed love away for decades and decades, for as long as he's been the Reaper. And then, kind of Paris stumbles into his life, and Paris is very pretty. Everyone, just kind of considers him the full son of the mobster who will someday, live off the money, but can't run the organization. And he has, taken advantage of his privilege at points, but he's also listened. He has, stolen from his dad. He's played a little bit of Robin Hood, of stealing from his dad to give to people that needed things. And so he kind of has this opportunity now to help people, help Mac, because he's a cold case detective and there's lost souls that are talking to him. And it all factors into this kind of war that's going on, and they're trying to figure out who tried to sacrifice him, how some of these souls might be connected to it. But also he's been really held down by his abusive father for so long. And when the father's no longer in the picture, he just kind of flourishes, like comes into his own, like there's nobody there, who's telling him, no, you can't paint, you can't wear that, you can't do this or say that. And so he comes very much kind of to life, and in doing that also sort of brings Mac back to life.
Allison, who are we hanging out with a little bit more in your world?
Yeah, so Um, Ember is a human, one of the very few humans in the book, actually. And she's in her 30s. She was in her living life, she was a life coach and a content creator. She had a YouTube channel, TikTok, that sort of thing. Her business was called Find Your Spark. And so she's got sort of like a top tip life tip for every situation, and likes everything to be sort of very organized and neat. And so, as I said before, when her carefully planned death does not go according to plan, and it turns out that life is what happens, or what is it? People plan, God laughs, something like that. Like, she's got a plan, but the Afterlife Incorporated is so overworked and bureaucratically screwed up that like they can't even keep track of her to pick her up, much less get her properly registered. So she meets a medium named Jupiter, who she follows home to Etobicoke, which is the suburbs of Toronto, and that's where she meets Kelly, who's just sort of living in Etobicoke, doesn't really want to talk about why they don't live or why they don't work at Afterlife anymore. Doesn't really care what pronouns you use. Reapers are sort of shape-shifting, genderless beings, and so Kelly sees no reason to like choose a pronoun, because I'm just going to look different and feel different tomorrow. Pronouns are a stupid human concept anyway. So yeah, that's the, sort of Kelly's attitude towards everything, is that's just an unrealistic human concept anyway. Really, the only thing they want to do is eat pizza and play video games. So Ember decides to haunt them and make their life miserable until they finally give in and agree to help her work through the red tape and get over to Afterlife, which turns out to be a lot more complicated than even Kelly thought it would be. And then we get into the reasons why Kelly doesn't work there anymore, and it goes on and on. It's funny, I had a meme this week, or no, a Facebook memory that came up this week that said something about like, I'm so glad I write fantasy now so I can stop writing about people who are unhappy in their corporate jobs. And I did that for a little while, but now I just write fantasy where people are unhappy in their corporate jobs. So apparently this is just a thing with me.
All right, Miss Dorine, let's dive a little bit deeper into your rockers playing with teapots.
All right. Well, this is Hawk and Aaron's story. They are founding members of the band. And Hawk's family had a bit of a tragedy right after Oktoberfest. He lost his brother and his sister-in-law, and he was given custody of their 3 little kids. So he's, suddenly thrust into raising a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 4-year-old, which provides some rather interesting times for him. At one point, Aaron visits, and there's how'd that glob of frosting get on the ceiling? And he's like, how am I supposed to know? I've got, he rattles off the kids' ages. Anything could have put it up there. So, he's drastically had to change his life. He's not able to be on the road, and it's eating at him because so much has changed so fast. And one of the things that have changed is his access to his on-again, off-again boyfriend, Aaron, who is kind of floundering now because they've lost 2 band members. They kind of split down the middle with the 4 that were left, and 2 went to go form one band and 2 stayed. And now they're like, okay, we've got to bring in a new drummer. We've got to bring in a new rhythm guitarist. Somebody's got to sing. And Aaron's like, yeah, that's not going to be me. I don't sing. Problem is he does, and he's actually really, really good at it. He just has had so many reasons to stifle it over the years that it's become kind of automatically, no, I don't sing and I'm not doing it. Fortunately, there is a dear, sweet little girl named Dani, and she really, really, really wants to hear her Uncle Aaron sing. And you don't disappoint children, so the whole band winds up getting to see and hear Aaron singing. And it is a little struggle integrating 2 new members of the band, navigating a long-distance relationship, figuring out ways Hawk can still contribute. He's still writing music. Aaron is actually still helping him. They're figuring out how all the pieces can kind of slip back together, even though the shape won't be the same as it used to be. And maybe they've got some missing parts and pieces, so they make the picture smaller, but it still is a beautiful picture just the same when they finally do get to Rocktoberfest and that key performance where Aaron is up on the stage.
So, kind of looking at one of the questions that always kind of comes to mind, right? Because there's always the story, there's always the adventure, there's always the conflict. But at the core of any story are the relationships. And I think especially in stories like these, it's all about how do you go about building the relationships, the trials, the tribulations, the way people meet, the way they grow together, all the angst and things that happen. And Ari, I'm going to blame you for the reason I'm going to go with this question. So we're going to start with you anyway.
So,
What is it about how you go about building relationships in stories? And what have you learned about relationships from having all this fun, messing with people's lives?
well, I mean, I think for almost any romance writer, the key that, love conquers all, has basically got to be the thing that you work towards, because otherwise you can't throw these guys into all of the really horrible things that we put them through sometimes. I think that for me, particularly for this story, again, I was writing him and he was fighting me. And I hope that other authors understand when I say that the character was not cooperating with me. He was not going in the direction I wanted him to go. And yes, I know I was putting the words on paper, but you only take dictation of what's in your head. And it wasn't until I sat down and I looked at it and I said, oh, he's a Scorpio. That's why I didn't understand him, was because he's this moody, and I wasn't ever envisioning him on being this moody, angsty kind of person. So as a result, Kit, his love interest, I had to actually tilt him towards being a lot more understanding. So, I mean, there has to be a balance, right? I mean, if you have two moody jerks together, then they're just going to butt heads and they'll probably never get together. So I guess the biggest lesson I've learned is it's all about balance. You have to balance, one of them's strengths with, the weaknesses of the other, and throw a good healthy dose of forgiveness in there too for the times that there's misunderstandings. And that talking is the key, that they have to be, it's not just falling into bed. It's not just, oh, we've got this great chemistry. They have to be able to communicate. And so, the thing that my co-author Rachel Angela always tells me is, use your words, please use your words. So yeah, just learning to balance the characters against each other and to make them talk, even if they don't want to talk.
All right, Irene, how about you? What have you learned about characters and relationships? And you're on mute.
Okay, hi. I've said for years that whatever bad traits my characters have are basically me throwing myself on page and trying to figure out if somebody can still love me. So that's that. To answer that, I guess. I will say Boss is he's much more, I would say he comes across as much more of an innocent than some of my characters. The only way I can think that kind of relates is because my husband used to always say that he would accuse me of having these rose-colored glasses, and it wasn't always a compliment. But Boz actually has, he does have some kind of bad traits. One of the things you learn about him is that he's very, very lucky, and he's grown up in this small town. And so he assumes that things are going to work out well. And he also doesn't ask a lot of questions when maybe he should. And sometimes maybe he doesn't ask questions because he doesn't want to know the answer. So he's kind of being a little willfully blind in certain ways. Anu is not like that. He knows what he's doing. But he I think another one of the things, I think sort of a theme probably in a lot of my characters is acceptance, either of yourself and or of the other partner. And like Ari said, balance. I find opposites attract is a really powerful theme for me. Boz also makes a lot of assumptions about Anu because he's, again, it's kind of the jock nerd thing. So he's this highly educated scholar traveling halfway across the world to study at the Great Library. And he meets this guy who is very athletic. When he first meets him, he thinks he might literally, like, being an athlete might be his job. And so he seems quite more intelligent than he expects him to be, but he kind of doesn't again ask very many questions or put two and two together. So he makes some assumptions about Anu that turn out to be extremely wrong. And Anu lets him. He doesn't correct him at any, for quite some time until a very dramatic moment. And so I think that that kind of, there's also, I'm an atheist, but all of my books seem to have religious overtones somehow, or the ones I've written recently anyway. So there's a lot of kind of religion between the two of them and between the time period. So I think the relationship is, again, it's getting to know each other. There's acceptance and there's being able to be honest with each other and being able to understand what's important to the other person, and be accepting and supportive of that. So I hope that's what I did anyway. I'm never sure until after I write the book what's going on. And then somebody will read it and tell me what I did. So just released. I'm kind of still waiting on that part.
How about you, Liv? What have you learned about relationships and creating relationships for your characters, and especially if you can throw in that how do you bring love to the undead?
Yeah, that's the tricky bit. Actually, the interesting piece about this is because the trigger for the relationship is an inanimate object that they both happen to touch, right? That creates a spell that brings them together. And so that moment happens, but then to continue to give both characters agency in and giving them space to learn about each other and get to a point where they actually like each other, beyond just what the spell gives them, and do that all in 40,000 words or less. So that was the challenging bit, to make the relationship feel deeper and realer than just a magic boom, y'all are in love kind of thing. And I hope I did that. I'm kind of like Irene, like people have to read it and tell me what I did, because I'm not exactly sure. But that was sort of what I was trying to explore. Like if you got into a situation where you were magically connected to a person, what would it take to actually like them? And that's why there's no sex scene in this one, because I'm not sure that they were ready for sex. Although I did get a 2-star review saying, there was no sex scene in this. I got gypped. Sorry, you might need to.
I have the sacred stones. So
All right,
my
Miss.
only funny moment.
Oh, sorry, Irene. I didn't mean to cut you off. All right, Miss Reyne. What did you learn about relationships and building your relationships?
So, I mean, a lot of what other folks have said with balance and use your words. I definitely noticed the more I've written, I tend to skew toward older characters. Paris is younger, but old soul, right? But older characters that talk, that use their words. And surprise, like particularly with this one, right? Like Paris isn't who you think he is. Mac isn't necessarily who you think he is. The next book that's coming, they are not who you think they are, on so many levels. And you kind of have to dig to find people sometimes, and find your person. May not be who you think it is right off the bat, because of what they're hiding, what they're protecting themselves, or potentially protecting others. And then also, food, the weight of the heart's through the stomach. And anyone who knows me is probably not surprised as how much of a foodie I am and stuff. And so I love those scenes in books. I think it's the most romantic when, somebody cooks for the one character cooks for the others or for their family. And, my husband's the cook in the house, the really good one. And so that's a little bit of our life too, that you see sprinkled in there.
Allison, how about you?
I was muted. So Kelly and Ember's relationship is literally still a work in progress because I'm 45,000 words into book 2 and we've had one kiss. So I'm enjoying like exploring this relationship on a longer time frame than, Liv said, how do you get people to credibly fall in love in 40,000 words? Like, how do you let people fall in love over 150,000 words without losing the reader? Is my challenge right now. I think a lot when I'm writing the last couple of years, when I think about romantic relationships, but relationships in general in books, I'm a big fan of Gail Carriger's book on the heroine's journey, and how those stories are almost always like a journey towards relationships, towards community, as opposed to a character who thinks in a romance, you often have one character who thinks they're off on a hero's journey where they've got to do everything themselves and everyone else is a distraction. And then you have the other romantic partner who's interested in them, and slowly brings them into community. And I think with Kelly and Ember, I think they both think they're on a hero's journey, actually, like a very solitude kind of. Ember has died. Like, I think she really believes she's left everything, her family, her online community, like she's left everybody behind. And Kelly has quit their job and is living among the humans who they really don't care to get to know. So the whole journey is going to be about finding family, finding community, finding love. Yeah, and it gets, I'm a big fan of writing like big ensemble casts with quirky side characters. Orange cats. There is an orange cat in Only Mostly Dead named Carrot Stick, because obviously. So I think it's about finding those opportunities where two people are starting to fall in love and they're showing each other that like you don't actually have to be the person, not necessarily like I don't need anybody, but like you don't have to be the person who makes the decisions all the time. You don't have to be the person who goes it alone on everything. Like we can do this together. So that's where I'm aiming for with the further afterlife books.
Miss Dorine, how about you?
Oh my gosh, this book, I started it last year and Hawk was silent. He just was very stubbornly set in his, this will happen in my time, this will go at my pace. I've got stuff to work out, so I'm not talking. And I'm like, okay, so I put the book aside, wrote another book, came back to this book this year, and I'm like, you know what? I'd always had a potential secondary love interest in mind. I'm just going to work with that character. And if Hawk ends up just being, a side character through this book and watching Aaron fall for somebody else, then so be it. I've never seen a character get more jealous and pissed off. Oh my goodness. Finally, this character talked, and that's all he did was talk. And suddenly I had all of his story and all of the things that he hadn't given me the year before. And he even calls Aaron out about when he catches him staring at this other love interest character. And it's just like, really, dude, you had to get jealous before you would show up on the page and cooperate with me. So it really, in a way, was like how these characters, or at least one of them, could become so complacent with the other that he relied on him just being there and sitting on standby and waiting till he figured all his stuff out. And that was really the thing that I learned, was just how quickly the characters can react when it looks like things are not going to work out the way that they expected them to, and they have to kind of clean up their act, make their intentions known, jump into things, and just in some cases, Hawk had to take charge and really show that, that I'm not going to lose you to somebody else. We've been at this for too long. We can figure out how to make it work. And really apologize too for the way he acted.
Seressia, how about you?
Forgot the question, so if you could repeat the question.
Oh, sure. It's more of
Appreciate
a what is it? What'd you learn about writing characters, writing connections, writing that romance, writing how people have that relationship?
Well, for me, well, with these characters, it ended up being kind of a he fell first, love at first touch kind of thing. The theme in it is kind of agency and having these kindred spirits because their magics are very similar and they haven't met anybody with the same kind of magic that they have. So they develop a bond that way. Um, there I go, getting off on a tangent and can't remember what the original question was. But I think that it's for me, it's like everybody else was saying, it's about community, it's about using the words, it's about building the trust, but wanting to do the best for that person because you want that person to survive. Author really wants Morgan to survive, but she is also an independent woman in 2024. So, she has her own agency and she has to basically tell him that I appreciate the support and the help, but you also have to let me be uh, the heroine in my own story and let me rescue myself. So with help from their friends, of course. So I think that in writing them, I learned a lot about because I haven't done it like an Insta love or love at first sight kind of a thing. So it was kind of interesting to um, play off of their similarities for each other, focus on the family, their desire to help other people, and how they grow with this basically this looming timeline that's over Morgan and how they are just going about trying to do the best that they can while developing this relationship, whether they want it or not, as the clock is basically ticking for her.
So I'm going to throw a little bit of bonus on top of this just because we kind of touched on it a little bit. And somebody was dumb enough to leave me in charge. And that's this. As writers, for anybody that wants to touch this one or die for cover, it's entirely up to you. But the big question is this. How do you go about wrangling the voices in your head when those characters refuse to do what you want them to do and they insist on doing what they want to do?
I go with it.
I've given up on wrangling them. I might be able to trick them, like in the case with, throwing an extra love interest in there to see if that would move the story along and to see what would happen. Sometimes it's just switching things up. I can never quite lead them where that I want them to go, but sometimes I can trick them into going where I want them to go just by changing a bit of the story or introducing another stimulus or, flipping the script on them and forcing them to react. And some are just stubborn and go sit in the closet and pout and make me have to put the story away.
Well, for
I'm
me,
big
I'm
on
lighting
timeouts.
incense and I'm praying to the altar of the muse. Anything I can do to get them to dictate the story to me. It's trying to make them go where you want to go. I usually end up being in a corner, writing into a corner until they start talking to me again. And it's such a relief when you can finally you get on the same level with the characters and then it's just basically like you're channeling them almost. And that to me is anything I can do to get myself to that point is the way that I want to go.
I mean, I've definitely, and Allison's had to listen to me scream about characters not talking. And so, I mean, I've done the same thing as Layla of putting them aside and do a different book, even if it's a short story or something like that for them to marinate a little bit. But then two other tricks, music helps me tremendously, particularly if I'm associating certain songs or albums or artists with that couple. Then listening to that and getting there for some reason, that helps a whole lot, particularly if I'm doing it before it's time to write their story, like to get in the mindset. And then I write out of order. So I'm like, okay, here's the end. Y'all can do whatever shenanigans you want to do. As long as we agree, we end up there. Right. And that seems to kind of work sometimes, not always, but it seems to be a negotiation that we can manage sometimes.
That is called witchcraft, is what
Yeah.
that is. I have done the opposite. Layla makes it more complicated than she needs to. I have streamlined incredibly. And now pretty much all my books are only single POV. And if you only have to write one point of view, the other character can be a mystery for as long as they want to. Because then they're just like the cool, aloof, mysterious love interest, and it looks intentional. That is 100% what I did with Kelly. Kelly didn't want to talk to me. I'm just a lowly human. So I wrote Ember's story, and Kelly came along for the ride.
Ari, I think you started saying, oh, go ahead, Kelly. Irene, sorry.
That's interesting, Allison, because this is literally the first book I've written that was not in dual POVs. Well, I mean, when I write with Liv, I'm only one of the two POVs, but there is another POV going on.
That other POV. Yeah.
I think it was really interesting because I'm very character driven. So for me, it's if my character does something, it's more about me figuring out why it happened rather than trying to control them a lot of times. So I thought that was really interesting that you said writing in one POV is kind of easier. I found it harder because I found it harder to just really, I didn't have like Anu's thoughts basically, but it was interesting. It was interesting.
No, well, the trick ultimately, you do have to like make some decisions, whether or not they reveal all of those things up front or later on or not at all. Like you do have to make some choices. But I mean, I've had books where characters have fought me. My first Uncharted, the first book in The Pirate and Her Princess, was entirely single POV, and one of the reasons for that was because the pirate character just refused to talk to me. And so and I knew the second book was going to be from her POV, and so the first book was literally me like making notes on the side being like, and then she thinks about this and then she thinks about that, because I would never have been able to write it as dual POV going forward because I didn't know that character at all. So there's a trick to it for sure.
But see, when I tried that trick, I wrote one point of view, and then that character was undercover, and then he had to be someone else on the next book, and I was like, oops, that didn't work.
I thought it worked. I love that book.
The things we do to ourselves.
Right?
They really, writers always make it harder for themselves than they need to.
I think my biggest struggle last year was that I only had Aaron's point of view. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, there's no balance. And Hawk was just being such a brat about it. I was like, okay, Rocktoberfest is ticking down. And I would kind of hit panic mode and was like, screw it. And wrote a whole different story. And it ended up being really fun. And there's another book that's coming from that one too, that will probably also be Rocktoberfest. But sometimes for this one, and I think I cut 30 to 40,000 out of the book before it was rewritten, and it still ended up at 88K.
One thing that I do, and it's actually particularly part of either if you're in a contemporary or if you're part of a shared world like Rocktoberfest, is when I got stuck on key change last year was I threw in a character from another contemporary that it became a crossover with Herx Merx, which was not what I was planning at all. But it's like, okay, I need something to kind of like move this along, flip it, make these guys look at each other in a different way. So I just hauled in a character from another story. And it really helped to like pull things in, because usually people who are reading my contemporaries have read most of the different contemporary series, but it's really nice in a shared world. I also, in High Strung, Anne Barwell is another one of the Rocktoberfest authors, and she and I just sat down. It's like, oh, let's write our guys talking to each other. And that was a good way to like get into the head of, because I hadn't written word one on High Strung yet. When we did this scene, it's like, oh, okay, so that's who he is. So sometimes, yeah, it can be very synergistic with other authors.
Well, sometimes it's just a matter of you got to turn them loose and then wrangle them back in. Well, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys and how to stack all these things up on that to be read pile before we get out of here. So, Miss Dorine, you're up first.
All right. Well, I am Layla Dorine. I write LGBTQ fiction and romance. You can find me at Rainbow Lyrics and Mellow Mushrooms on Facebook far too often. I'm dipping my toes back into Instagram, and I'm at Layla Dorine at Wix.com if you're looking for my website. Broken Chorus released today, so it is live and it is on Kindle Unlimited.
Seressia?
You can find me at Seressia.com. I'm also on Facebook more than I should be, and dipping my toes into TikTok, and I don't like cameras. I'm camera shy, so I'm not on Instagram all that much either. But I do try to get out there and occasionally post some snark and stuff like that. So, but yes, Seressia.com is where you can find me.
Ari?
You can find me at arimckay.com, and like so many of these people right here that I'm looking at, I'm on Facebook all the time. And my contemporaries and historical romances are published as Ari McKay, and the paranormal and urban fantasy and Southern Gothic books are published as Rachel Langella. And High Strung releases on the 27th of October, and it is in Kindle Unlimited.
Irene?
IrenePreston.com. And right now I'm a hermit and I live in a cave. I withdrew from life a few years ago. But no, seriously, I'm on Twitter and a couple of other places. If you want to come by and chat, Liv and I actually run a Facebook group together called After Hours. And there are links to that from my website. The God's Guardian just released. So it is in Kindle Unlimited, and I don't put very many books in Kindle Unlimited. No offense to Kindle Unlimited readers. I just like having my books everywhere generally. But God's Guardian and the Pharaoh's Promise are all in Kindle Unlimited. So come and get it.
Liv?
So you can find me on livrancourt.com, and I am on Facebook. Yeah, a lot. I'll be honest. Also Threads. I do have a TikTok account that I'm starting to side-eye again because maybe I'll get back into it. And yeah, Icon Thief came out last Monday, and I don't have an upcoming release till after the first of the year. So cool.
Miss Reyne?
Yep. I'm online at www.laylareyne.com. You can access my direct store there as well. I'm on all the socials at Layla Reyne. The book was Paris and the Reaper, was out direct last week. It is wide everywhere today. And yeah.
Allison?
So you can find my website at AllisonTemple.com. You can buy books directly from me there. And on social, I just deleted Facebook off my phone and I feel really good about it. But I am on Facebook, less than everybody else apparently. You can find me at Allison Temple Books on Instagram and TikTok. For all my superiority about Facebook, I spend way too much time on TikTok, so that's the best place to find me. The book today was Only Mostly Dead. And it is available wide at all retailers as of yesterday.
And you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, creatingprose.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And go stack up those to be read piles.